What you're outlining is positive, negative, interesting, fascinating, disturbing characteristics of males and females. And I think this is very important to study and understand. When that hits the wall of ideology, and then all of a sudden you're no longer allowed to look at those things because they are sexist or because they are misogynistic or because they have been labeled in a very certain way, and that looking at things and framing things through the eyes of science and just using data becomes problematic. And that these people are actually academics who are promoting this idea.
Yeah.
And that they, like you said, self-replicate. So they self-replicate, self-replicate. They have now students who are also promoting these ideas.
Right.
And those students go on to become professors who are promoting these same ideas. None of them are based in reality, and it's all funded. And people are paying money to send their children to school, so their children come back and say, well, Mom and Dad, I don't know if you know this, but there are no differences between men and women, and everything is cultural, and this is all bullshit, and this is all the patriarchy. And you're like, what the fuck am I paying for? My kid's brain's getting broken.
Yeah, and strangely enough, I think there's almost an inverse correlation between number of years of higher education and ability to kind of see reality. So, like, if you stop just people on the street, the average man or a woman, and said, are there sex differences? They would say, well, yeah, sure. And they could probably even tell you what many of them are. But it's like this inculcation of ideology, which has unfortunately infected universities in ways that I find appalling and have gotten worse in my lifetime. And I got into this field precisely for the reason that you allude to, because I'm interested in finding out about human nature, wherever that leads me. That what makes people tick, what motivates people, what gets people out of bed in the morning. I have no interest in maintaining a position that is empirically incorrect.
Right. Well, but it's because you're not a grifter. But unfortunately, academics encourages grifting in a way that you don't have to exist in the real world. And you go from being a student in the university to eventually teaching at a university. And you will spend no time in the real world outside of that. Yeah. And then your very existence and everything that you get from validation from your peers and your students, it's all based on this grift that you have been taught and are now teaching, and that you will argue against empirical reality. You will argue against science and data because it does not support your grift, and that grift is being supported by a university.
Right, but
which is wild.
Yeah, but that's why I hope that this is that there will be a swing back of the pendulum.
How is that going to happen, though? Because it doesn't seem like that's moving in any direction. Remotely similar to that right now.
I think it is, though.
Really?
Yeah. There's some universities, University of Chicago, MIT. There's some universities that are starting to push back against this ideology. And get back to the business.
How are they doing that?
Well, one, for example, is reinstating the standardized testing, like SATs and GREs. So many universities throughout the country, and this happened very recently, eliminated them. And one of the problems with eliminating them is that you cut off one of the primary paths by which lower socioeconomic kids can advance. Because you have like kids who grew up in lower SAS groups in poverty or slums or whatever, but they score high on these tests. That provides an elevator for them to get ahead in the world. And you take away those tests, you eliminate what is now known to be one of the primary routes by which people can become upwardly mobile. From those groups. And it was eliminated on, I think, ideological grounds because it was purported to show that the tests are biased. And there's been a kind of anti-testing movement period. But now there's some university, and I think MIT is one that said, okay, well, we eliminated it. Actually, now we're reinstating it because we realized that was a mistake. So I think there are at least some signs that there is pushback against this ideology. But maybe I'm being, too rose-colored glasses, and maybe I'm overly optimistic about it. I like to think that reality kind of has a tether on people's belief systems in the long run, even if they're distorted by the ideology in the short run.
Well, I tend to think that this sort of ideology that you're seeing from kids today, it's very infectious, and it seems like it's a bit of a mind virus. And it's something that if you don't espouse to these ideas, if you don't agree with these ideas, you're ostracized from the community. And in academic circles, in universities, and with a lot of young people that are trying to establish themselves as being a person of moral high ground, who is doing the right thing, is on the right side of history, this is a very compelling narrative that people are going along with, and it has to do with gender identity, it has to do with politics, it has to do with their thoughts on the climate change crisis.
Right.
There's so many different factors that are all tied in to this one very specific and very aggressive ideology. And I don't see any pushback against it.
Yeah. Well, we'll see. I mean, I of course teach the science in my courses. I teach a large undergrad.
Do people complain?
We've gotten very few complaints. So I teach pretty large classes. So I have literally hundreds of students. I teach one online class that's simultaneously broadcast. The students have to have their computer open, and then one in-person class has about 120 or so. But every semester I teach, say, 500 to 600 students, and there are always a couple complaints. But before I taught it this last time, precisely because of the ideological swings that you have mentioned that we've been talking about, I went to the chair of my department and I said, look, I've been teaching this course now, co-teaching it with a colleague of mine, Dr. Cindy Meston, which is great because having a male and female saying the same things basically is very effective. We teach a course on human sexuality, and I went to my chair and I said, look, there's been this ideological shift of sex difference denial. I said, but as a professor, I am obligated to teach the science. And I said, I'm not going to deviate from that. And I'm going to be teaching about sex, biological sex, which has a very clear definition,